afternoon and welcome everybody to the Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs Next Level Connections Broadband Grant Program Full Application Walkthrough. If you are dialed in, if you would please keep your phones muted during the presentation, and we will accept questions at the end via the chat. And we'll go through some guidelines in just a moment. So just some overall guidelines for the webinar today. Please submit all of your questions via the chat function in the WebEx. And then for your audio, please keep your phone or computer device muted during the webinar to minimize background noise. So just a brief introduction of the team that is on the call today from our office. My name is Diana Raggio. I'm the NLC Program Director that's overseeing the Broadband Grant Program, so overseeing the administration and monitoring of the projects once they've been selected, along with Adam Surveys, who is one of our grant program managers within the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. And then we also have Melissa Thomas, who is our communications manager. So if you have any press or media inquiries, Melissa will be your best point of contact to go to. The high-level agenda for the webinar today, we're going to go through the program timeline for this second round. We're going to review a few of the changes to the process in this round. We're going to go through the full application and the required documents. We're going to quickly review the scoring criterion, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. And again, please make sure that you're submitting any of your questions via the chat function. Also, if you have questions after the webinar today, please feel free to submit those at any time to the nlc@okra.in.gov email box, and we'll respond to those within a timely manner. So just a high-level timeline of this second round. Letters of intent were due on February 6th. Those of you that did submit a letter of intent, you should have received an eligibility notification letter back from us on February 7th. So notifying you whether you have been invited to submit a full application. Also on February 7th, the office published all of the census blocks and the abstracts for those letters of intent on our website to officially open up the challenge phase. So currently, all of that information is public on the website and available for incumbent providers to review and potentially challenge those census blocks. Challenge submissions are due March 10th. Our office will be reviewing those and making determinations of whether those have met the requirements as outlined in the challenge documentation. We will plan to publish those decisions by March 25th. That way, you as full applicants will have an opportunity to make amendments to your application if needed. And then full applications are due as of April 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern. We will review that deadline again at the end of this webinar, but I just want to stress that all of the applications must be received by OKRA at 3 p.m. Eastern on April 10th. We'll then move into the review period where those applications will be reviewed by a panel, and then we will make recommendations to selection officials and then eventually announce selections. We're expecting to do that by June 1st. So just to review some of the changes that have occurred in the second round, there were a few changes to the process itself. The letter of intent, you'll hold for just a moment. Sorry, there were a bunch of emergency vehicles passing by the office, and I didn't want you all to have to hear that in the background. So just a few changes that we implemented to the application process based on the first round itself, and then also feedback meetings that we conducted with the applicants and other key stakeholders. So we changed the process to include a letter of intent. We have moved the challenge up, and so the challenge is being conducted prior to the full application submission. This allows applicants the opportunity to potentially either remove census blocks from their application or provide additional evidence of an unserved area. The focus of the program remains on the unserved areas of Indiana. We also worked to clarify the requirements of the program as defined in Indiana Code 4-4-38.5, the broadband grants for rural areas. So clarifying what eligible broadband service means and what an eligible broadband service provider is defined as in code. We have also provided template forms on our website that should be utilized for the full application submission. There's also a sample affidavit document as an appendix in the round 2 application document. And so these were just some of the high-level changes that we implemented from the first round into this second round. And I'm actually going to turn it over and have Adam go through some of the requirements for the program.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam. So getting into the full application for this round 2 here, each letter of intent received a letter from OCRA via the NLC email. So if eligible, the letter invited the applicant to submit a full application for the corresponding project as identified by the title and control number. The full application must include the control number issued by OCRA in that email in the upper right-hand corner of the header page of every page, or the header of every page, and page numbers must be included in the footer of every page. So, also, file naming conventions are identified in the round 2 application document, and all documents should be provided as a PDF unless specified otherwise. For example, the census block list and the budget table must be submitted as Excel files. So information that contains trade secrets should be marked as confidential and saved in a separate file pursuant to code 514.3.4a.4. These records may not be disclosed by a public agency. So that's the same as last round, and you've probably heard us say it before, but again, we just want to stress, please mark confidential information as confidential. So required documents, there are 12 overall. Here are the first 6. And going into each of these in a little more detail in the following slides. So if you have questions, we might cover it in these next slides. And then also the checklist is available in Appendix A in the round 2 application for you to review and just kind of check off prior to the submission deadline. So project narrative number. The project narrative is divided into 5 sections. Points on the screen. There are a total of 33 specific questions within those, and an applicant should provide detailed responses regarding the proposed project area rather than focusing on statewide reports. The narrative should reflect an understanding of the current conditions, the proposed infrastructure, and how it will impact the community. So if an applicant is including census blocks shown as served on the FCC data, the evidence of unserved in the project impact section, that sub-bullet, is where the narrative describes why these, should describe why these blocks should be considered as unserved. So applicants can use additional evidence and support there to substantiate the text. So on the project schedule, the project activity should reflect what is described in the project narrative and demonstrate a clear understanding of the scope of work. The schedule should outline the tasks, milestones, and final deliverables. And one of the final tasks should indicate the date on which the service to the last passing will be installed or available. And the duration for the task should be clear and includes any schedule constraints where appropriate. Applicants may utilize a Gantt chart as kind of shown here on the slide, or another methodology familiar to their organization. However, the schedule must not exceed 24 months in length, so 2 years, and it is recommended that the schedule begin in July of 2020. So number 3, technology specifications. These should provide detailed information on the type of technology that will be utilized in the proposed project and information on the construction of the route. So the documents must clearly demonstrate that the infrastructure provides capacity for transmission at the actual speed levels proposed. Certifications should be on the certifying engineer's letterhead and/or stamped. PE is not required to be an Indiana PE for the purposes of this application, but it must be a PE. So again, on the slides in bold, these specifications must be certified by a PE. So number 4, proposed area maps. Applicants must submit a high-resolution, color, and detailed map or maps of the proposed infrastructure route and the locations that will be available to receive service. Applicants can also submit KMZ shapefiles with this information if they so choose, but it's not a requirement. And a little bit further on the area maps, please ensure the maps are legible and contain legends for the corresponding details. Reviewers should be able to read the roads and understand what is being conveyed through these maps. So we've just provided a little bit of example there. And on to number 5, the census block list. So this is one of those documents where we have a template for you. If you submitted an LOI, you used it, please just use the same one. So passings include households, businesses, and anchor institutions. Business is defined as all business types, including farms and including home-based businesses, or like work at home, telecommuter use. Do not include underserved passings in these numbers. You can include that information in the project narrative. So identify if the census block is partially served, and if it is partially served, to what estimated percentage based on the passings within the census block, and what providers currently provide service. For unincorporated areas and third-party infrastructure, those should just be a yes or no by the individual census block, so each row. Speed levels may include all tiers, though it must include the minimum speed level to be offered by the project. And this document is going to be an Excel file, as I said before. New census blocks cannot be included in the full application submission. Census blocks may only be removed from the letter of intent submission. So when you submitted your letter of intent, you can't add anything new, but you can take away if you so choose. And number 6, halfway through, the budget table. So the budget table must indicate the sources of funding, whether that's state or cost share, or also known as local, the corresponding budget category, and the amount of funds that are eligible project expenses. Use the recommended budget categories, and when applicable, you may include additional rows where anticipated expenses do not fall within one of the recommended categories. Be mindful, though, that the table contains formulas in the total cost and percentage of project columns. So ensure that the formulas are updated for those applicable rows if you did add them. And then cost share points will be calculated from the percentage displayed in this document. And this document must also be an Excel file. And I'm going to hand it back over to Diana.
Great. So we'll go through the second half of these required documents. So number 7 is the summary for public release. This must be a one-page abstract of the proposed project. So ultimately, this should be an expansion of the brief abstract that was provided in the letter of intent. It should be suitable for public dissemination, and the summary must include, at the minimum, the applicant name, project title, general geographic location. So that might include county, the name of cities or towns that you're targeting, and general larger community areas. If you want to include specifics, that's up to you. The abstract should identify the technology solution that is being deployed with the project, so whether that's fiber, fixed wireless, DSL, we just need to know the exact type of technology. And the summary must include some information about the potential impact of the project, and if there are any project partners, please make sure that those are also identified within the public release. Number 8 is the authorizing affidavit. This authorizes the application and also guarantees the applicant match. A sample is provided for you in Appendix B of the Round 2 application document. Please utilize the majority of this text. You may include additional information to it if you would like to include that in your affidavit, but at the minimum, please make sure that this information that's displayed on the screen is included in your affidavit. Number 9, funding commitments. You must submit written funding commitments from all project funding partners. That does include a commitment from you as the applicant. So that may be something as high level as a letter from your CFO identifying that you have X amount of dollars to provide for cash match for your project, or you have secured X amount of a line of credit from Bank X. Ultimately, any dollars that are being provided for your cost share / local match amount need a written commitment from those partners. So both the applicant, any public partners, so if you're partnering with a community or a county government, if you have any private partners, so if you're working with another provider or a private entity, please make sure that that is included. The letter must clearly state the amount of money that's being provided and the source of the funding. Number 10. So this will include both letters of need and letters of support. They're just on separate slides. So under letters of need, these should highlight current conditions, which may include no service availability. Letters should focus on both the quantitative metrics and qualitative stories relative to education, economic and workforce development, healthcare, telemedicine, and general quality of life. Letters of support are endorsements of the project. So these may be from residents, businesses, anchor institutions, local units of government, legislators, both state representatives and federal representatives, and any local government resolutions if applicable. Applicants are encouraged to work with their community partners to identify ways to utilize the proposed infrastructure. Number 11, 5-year financial plan. The 5-year financial plan should serve as a forecast for the proposed project demonstrating the financial model. This includes a description of how the costs and anticipated revenues will result in the financial viability of the project over time. The forecast should demonstrate the model with and without grant funding as shown in the image on the screen. There isn't a specific format or template for this. This is just a high-level image, but ultimately we just need to see that you have projected the project with funding or without grant funding. Number 12, current financial statement. The applicant must provide a recent financial statement, including an income statement and balance sheet for the most recently completed fiscal year. The financial statements must demonstrate the applicant's financial stability and capacity to execute and maintain the proposed project. If the financial statements if the financial statements being provided by the applicant are those of a parent or holding company, additional financial information should be provided for the entity and organization. So just a summary of the 12 documents. Make sure that when you submit these, that the attachments are organized, that the file names meet the standards that have been outlined in the Round 2 application document. And again, if you are submitting any information with trade secrets or proprietary business information, please ensure that those are marked confidential and saved in a separate file. So you potentially could submit up to 24 different documents if you are submitting some with business sensitive information and some without. So just make sure that if you are including any of that, that we don't have to attempt to decipher which documents should be considered confidential and which are not. So now we're going to just briefly review some of the scoring criterion that's outlined in the Round 2 application document. Applications will be evaluated against the merit review criteria that is outlined in that document. All of the sub-criteria that are identified are considered of equal weight. These criteria reflect information that is requested in the documents in the grant application package. So the subjective criteria, these are the 4 specific areas. So project description and readiness, project impact, community support and engagement, technical qualifications, and resources. And these 4 areas total 150 points of the review. And again, I encourage you to read the Round 2 application document and really familiarize yourself with those individual criterion and their sub-criteria. The objective criteria is broken out in 2 categories. So we have match percentage of the eligible project cost. So what percentage is the applicant providing for cost share or local match? An applicant may earn up to 25 points for their cost share and match percentage of the total project cost. Cost share points will be calculated from the percentage that was displayed in the budget table document. So again, 25 points was the maximum amount that could be received on this objective criterion. And then speed after build is the second objective criterion. An applicant may earn up to 75 points for their speed after build relative to the amount of passings that the project will provide service to when the construction is complete. If the maximum speed level offered by the project is not available, then please expect scoring to be based on the proposed upload speed. For example, if a project is proposing 500 megabytes per second download and 100 megabytes per second upload to 100 passings, then the project would receive 40 points for the speed after build. And again, the maximum amount that could be received is 75 points. Full applications must be received by OCRA at 3 p.m. Eastern on April 10th, 2020. OCRA strongly encourages applicants to review their full applications carefully and to allow sufficient time for the submission of required information and documents in advance of the deadline. If you require an FTP site to upload materials, please contact OCRA no later than March 31st of 2020 to request access. We need time in order to authorize users to that site, so we cannot receive requests for that after March 31st. So please make sure that you are reaching out to us well in advance of the deadline if you want to submit your documents to an FTP site. You must identify the point of contact who will need access to the FTP site. OCRA will not extend the submission deadline for applicants or challengers that failed to submit the required information due to server or connection congestion. So again, please make sure that you are submitting well in advance of the deadline If we receive things after 3 p.m. Eastern, it may not be included in your grant application package for review. So now we're going to go ahead and open up the chat and go through any of the questions that have been identified. If there are some things that we need to get back to you on, we will make sure that those questions are included in the Q&A document on our website. We do have that being updated on a fairly regular basis based on the questions that we've received. One question that's come in already is it too early to request FCP login access? No, it is not. You can go ahead and send us an email today, and we will make sure that your name is on the list so that we can get those over to the Office of Technology well in advance of that deadline. One question that we received is, can we challenge the challenger? So this is something that was a reason why we've kind of reformulated the process. We are not doing appeals at this time to either the challenge or the application itself, but you have the opportunity to provide additional evidence within your application. Specifically in the project impact section of the narrative is where you would really want to include additional written information about why an area should truly be considered unserved. You may support that through letters of need or any additional documents that you've identified as pertinent to why that area should be considered unserved. So some applicants in the past have wanted to include survey information with corresponding speed test data. You may do that. These were just 12 documents that we've outlined as required. You may upload additional information, but it is not a requirement. Can the value of a tax abatement be considered local match? We will look into that. At this time, it is unlikely given how we've responded in the past. Local match, it has to be cash match. We're not allowing in-kind costs, but we will look into that and get back to you. If you wouldn't mind actually submitting that question to the NLC email box so that we can make sure that we are following up with you directly. If we submitted 3 LOIs and we receive multiple challenges on each LOI, will we be able to condense it down to one application? So at this time, LOIs are not being challenged directly. The census blocks themselves are being challenged. So if you've had an opportunity to look on the website, the challenges are going out by census blocks rather than by applicant. So any challenges that come back should be solely by census block, not by individual application. At this time, we have not really considered if we would allow you to condense it into one application. So if you would also be willing to please submit that question to the inbox, and we'll get back to you. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to submit them at this time. We really wanted to be a resource and provide some information to you all. Will applicants be notified of challenges to their census blocks in their LOIs as those challenges are received? No, we're not planning to notify people individually. We are planning to publish all of the information at once as of March 25th at this time. Just due to capacity and resources on our end, we're going to review everything all together, and then we will be kind of re-reviewing things and making sure that we've kind of dotted the I's before we publish everything back out. But ultimately, that is why applicants were given a window to make adjustments to their applications. Will broadband ready status count towards local support? Yes, that is definitely something that you would want to include in your letters of support. So like I said earlier, if you had any local government resolutions, make sure to include those. So if it's things like broadband ready, or if you have enacted local policies, please make sure to include those so that the reviewers can assess that. Is there a recommended way to show eligible versus ineligible costs in an overall budget if a project is going through a CAF 2 funding area? So I don't think this is unique to just CAF 2 funding projects. We know that some providers may be working well outside of the scope that they're proposing for this program. You may choose to add another column on the budget spreadsheet. You could also include that information in the narrative itself. But ultimately, what our reviewers need to see is that information specific in the budget relative to the scope of work that's being proposed to ensure that it is reasonable compared to the two. But we understand that providers want to include some of the ineligible information to show that the work that they're doing is above and beyond what they're proposing for the project. We'll give you all a couple more minutes if there's any other questions. And again, please feel free to submit them directly to NLC if it's more pertinent to your individual project. So we received a question asking if we could clarify what we mean by unique project area in the round 2 application document under limitation on submissions. So ultimately, the goal of that was that an applicant is not submitting the same project area multiple times, and so that each letter of intent should be a different proposed project area, and that they had submitted a corresponding letter of intent for that area by the due date. If Okra deems a challenge challenge to be invalid, will OCRA provide the challenger with a specific reason that the challenge was deemed invalid and allow the challenger an opportunity to cure the challenge? At this time, we're not planning to take appeals to either applicants or challengers. We would be happy to provide feedback to those individual challengers if we do deem challenges invalid. Ultimately, you know, we are trying to get better information this time around from both the applicants and the challengers, and so we tried to make those distinctions in terms of what we're looking for in those documents. If you have a specific question on challenges, if you are planning to challenge, you can feel free to email the inbox and we'll respond to you offline. Will a recording of this webinar be available later? Yes, we will be posting this to our resources page, similarly to the letter of intent webinar that is available. And that is also the same subpage that you will find the questions and answers document that's being updated regularly. One question we received is, can you share more information on alternates? So that is under the section in the round 2 application document about award administration information. And so when we plan to identify successful versus unsuccessful applicants, we also are planning to reserve the right to identify potential selections for award. And so those are kind of what we're deeming as alternates. So that may be based on a number of factors, one of which is funding, so whether we have enough funding available, and if we've identified projects that are considered meritorious based on the review panel, and whether that's something we are still interested in reserving the right to fund later on. For scoring purposes, is the match percentage based only on eligible project costs or total project costs, if that total project also has some ineligible expenses? So the match percentage is based on the eligible project costs only. So somebody is asking about how to handle validly challenged census blocks. So if we make a determination, we being OCRA makes a determination that a census block that is at, so it's actually the requirements for a challenge is that they're providing a minimum level service of 10-1, and whether the applicant should drop it off of their application. What we are saying is that it is up to you as the applicant. We did hear feedback from the first round that applicants would have liked the opportunity to remove census blocks that had received a valid challenge, if that would allow them to potentially still proceed and be eligible to receive an award based on how they fared in the merit review. So that is why we want to leave it up to the applicant as to whether they want to remove those validly challenged blocks. We also recognize that there are some census blocks that are partially served. And so this may be an opportunity for the applicant to provide additional information in areas where there may be census blocks or areas of census blocks that are should truly be considered unserved. And so they may be providing letters of need, they might provide survey data, they might provide speed test data. They might provide proof that incumbent providers are not necessarily at that specific location. And that is why we are requiring address level data as part of the census block list template for both an applicant and also for challengers. If you have any follow-up questions on the census blocks, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll respond in a timely manner. If a challenge is submitted for a planned deployment, is there any specific supporting documentation that should be included to validate the construction plans? So at this time, there's not any specific documentation that needs to be required other than the affidavit that challengers must sign. Legislation is currently written that those that challenge and are later found to have provided information that they were going to build out and didn't build out, that those blocks would become ineligible to those providers in the future if they ever attempted to apply under the program. The first round, we are tracking the information from that, and we are planning to track the information in this next round as well, relative to those blocks that were deemed as proposed construction rather than current service. So one question is, if an applicant splits one project in the same geographic area into multiple LOIs, will OCR consider all of the LOIs as one project when enforcing the $5 million cap per project? If they submitted them as separate LOIs, those individual LOIs would have the $5 million cap. Ultimately, we recognize that there were several applicants that submitted large project areas in the last round and would have preferred to have those broken out into smaller project areas. So that's why we left it up to you as applicants as to whether you wanted to submit a large project area and potentially have pieces of that broken down, or if you wanted to submit the broken down areas as individual projects. So ultimately, each individual application is subject to the $5 million cap per project. And again, just to clarify that those should be unique project areas. So if you're applying for multiple LOIs, but you are having overlap within the same census block, you know, we're not going to fund that same census block multiple times. When you post the valid challenges, will you state the incumbent provider that is challenging a census block? Yes, we did do that last time. So we published that by provider in terms of who challenged each census block. Additionally, if there are multiple challengers to a census block, will you post all applicable challengers? Yes, we plan to post challenges by the individual census block so you can then correspond those back to your individual project areas. We just found in the first round that, you know, many census blocks received multiple challenges, and so we just wanted to attempt to reduce some of that by having challengers only have to submit one challenge for all census blocks that they're challenging rather than by individual application. And so hopefully that will reduce the burden on both challengers, applicants, and also our office. We'll give you all a couple more minutes if you want to submit any other questions. Again, if you have a question that you would prefer to ask offline, please send that directly to the NLC email box, and either myself or Adam will respond to you typically within 24 to 48 hours. And it's an early reminder, but if you have questions leading up to like the full application deadline date, I would definitely recommend you reach out sooner rather than later. This couple of days leading up to the deadline, we will be rather busy, and so we may not respond to you immediately or even within a 24-hour period. So if you have a pertinent question, we definitely want you to reach out to us sooner rather than later, so that we can get you the information that you need. And this applies to both challengers and applicants. You know, we want to make sure you all have the information and resources that you need to either submit a challenge or submit an application to the program. So we did get one last question, just clarifying some information about the challenge process. So it says that service must be available to all residential customers in the defined area. Does that deem any area unserved unless every address is served? No, it does not, but what we're asking of both the challengers and the applicants is that in those areas where you are only providing a partial level of service, that you identify what percentage that level, so what percentage of that area are you serving, and what are the addresses that correspond with that census block. So ultimately, we need to be able to see the addresses that a challenger is saying that they're providing service to, and also potentially if an applicant is providing or proposing to provide service to those same addresses, that we're able to then overlap that information and ensure that we're not funding a census block that is could be overbuilt. So that's why we're asking for address level information from both the applicant and the challenger, so that when it comes time to looking at applications that are potentials for selection, that we're able to do that analysis and ensure that we're not overbuilding with this funding. And so in terms of the percentage for the census block, it should be a percentage based on the number of passings within that census block. So for example, if you've identified that there are 100 passings within that block and you serve 45 of those, then you as the incumbent provider would say that you serve 45% of the block. But again, incumbent providers have the opportunity to include any proposed construction within that area. So making sure if it's proposed versus current service, that that's clearly identified within that information. And again, if there's any additional questions regarding the challenge process or challenge documentation, feel free to submit that information to us directly. One question was, will OCRA provide the address level data submitted by a challenger to the applicant? No, we will not be publishing that information. We did not publish address level data from the applicants, and we are not planning to at this point to publish address level data by the challengers. Much of that information is considered business sensitive and confidential, and we recognize that, though we do also encourage you all to mark that as such on any documents you're submitting that are considered confidential. We are bound by Indiana code to ensure that that information remains private and is not subject to a public records request. All right, I will give one last call out for questions, and if not, then we will let you all go. We will plan to publish this webinar on our website, so the recording will be available for anybody after today. Also, again, if you have any questions, please make sure that you reach out to the NLC at okra.in.gov email box. We want to ensure that everybody has the information that they need to be able to complete these processes both effectively and efficiently. All right, well, thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it and hope that this provided some clarification and answered your questions about the changes in the process and also what OCRA is expecting from you all for the applications that you submit. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.